It's a beautiful afternoon at the local park. The sun is shining, children are laughing, and families are enjoying the simple pleasures of the day. Among them is a black father, playing with his young child, both lost in the joy of the moment. The laughter of his child echoes through the playground, a sound of innocence and pure happiness. But this peaceful scene is about to take a dramatic turn, as someone in the park isn't so happy to see them there. The woman, standing a few yards away, watches the father and his child from a distance. Something about the situation doesn't sit right with her. She's been eyeing them for a while now, her gaze cold and unwelcoming. She stands with her arms crossed, and with every minute that passes, her discomfort seems to grow. Her thoughts begin to turn into judgments. What right does he have to be here, enjoying the same space as everyone else? He doesn't belong in her eyes. And before anyone can understand what's happening, the woman takes out her phone, dials 911, and suddenly, the calm atmosphere shifts. "Someone's acting suspicious," she says, her voice trembling with faux concern. "There's a man at the playground with his child, and I don't know what he's up to, but it doesn't feel right." Her words are filled with a tone that's all too familiar, one that implies fear, danger, and a sense of unwarranted suspicion, simply because of the color of the father's skin. The father, caught off guard by the sudden tension, pauses. He's aware of the weight of this moment, a moment where his very existence is being questioned. He tries to keep his composure, but there's a cold realization creeping in. No matter how innocent his actions may be, he is not seen as just a father enjoying time with his child. In that brief moment, his reality shifts. Other parents in the park notice the scene unfolding, some offering a nervous glance, others looking away, unsure of how to react. The air feels thick with discomfort, and it's clear that what's happening is more than just an unfortunate misunderstanding. It's a reflection of a much larger issue, one that many face every day, a world where people are judged not for who they are, but for how others perceive them. As the woman's words take shape over the phone, the 911 operator listens, their response calm but filled with confusion. There's no indication of any wrongdoing, no reason to assume anything dangerous is happening, yet the woman's insistence makes the situation all the more unsettling. The father, meanwhile, is trying to remain calm, trying to protect his child from what's unfolding. But there's no denying it, his every move is being scrutinized. The sound of sirens in the distance begins to cut through the air, growing louder with each passing second. The father looks around, unsure of what to expect next. It's not just the fear of being misunderstood that weighs on him, but the fear of what could happen once the police arrive. Will they listen to him? Will they see the truth? Or will they fall into the same trap of judgment that the woman has set? As the sirens grow closer, the tension in the park rises. People start to murmur, some already whispering about what's happening, some offering their support, others unsure of where to stand. But what happens next is something no one could have predicted. The police arrive on the scene, and the father's heart races, not knowing what this encounter will bring. Will they believe him? Or will they side with the woman who called them here? The moment is hanging in the balance. Every second feels like an eternity, and no one knows how it will end. Will this father's day with his child end in peace or chaos? What will the officers do when they arrive, and how will they handle the situation? All of this is about to unfold, but one thing is certain, nothing will be the same after this. Stay tuned for what happens next. The sound of the sirens grows louder, piercing the otherwise calm day at the park. The father's grip tightens on his child's hand as he looks around. His child, still blissfully unaware of the tension building around them, tugs excitedly at his sleeve, asking when they're going to the swings next. He forces a smile, his mind racing, trying to decide whether to keep them there or find a way to leave before the situation escalates. A part of him knows he should walk away, that the best course of action might be to avoid any confrontation, but another part feels it's important to stay, to stand his ground, to show that he and his child deserve to be there just as much as anyone else. It's a subtle choice, but one that weighs heavy on him. The idea of leaving with his tail between his legs doesn't sit right. Yet, he also knows he has to be careful, especially when the power dynamics are so loaded. He knows all too well how quickly things can spiral out of control when assumptions are made, and he can't afford to take that chance. As the sirens approach, the woman who called the police stands stiffly, still clutching her phone, her eyes fixed on him. Her expression is one of quiet triumph, as though she feels she's done something necessary, something righteous. There's a strange satisfaction in her posture as she watches the officers' vehicles roll into the park. Her body language speaks volumes, a sense of authority emanating from her, as though she holds all the power in the situation, as though she is the one in control. The father tries to steady his breath. It's hard to think clearly when you're being watched like this, when every move you make is being scrutinized. He knows this isn't just about him, it's about every black father who's been wrongly judged in a similar situation. It's about every person who has had their humanity questioned by someone who doesn't see them as an individual, but as a stereotype. As the police car comes to a halt, the officers step out, and the father feels the weight of their presence. There's nothing overtly threatening about their posture, but their eyes flick to him, and he can feel the tension rising in his chest. One officer makes a brief scan of the area, taking in the sight of the playground, the families, the children running around, and the seemingly ordinary scene unfolding. He glances at the woman who made the call, then back at the father. His gaze lingers for a moment, and the father's heart races. The moment stretches out, and in that silence, there's a palpable sense of something being misread. "Can I help you?" the father asks, his voice steady but his pulse quickening. He's trying to appear calm, to make it clear he has nothing to hide, but the nerves are creeping in, and it's hard to shake the feeling that he's being judged before he's even said a word. The officer turns to the woman. "What's going on here?" he asks, his voice polite but firm, almost too careful. It's a question that seems neutral on the surface, but the father can't help but notice the subtle shift in the officer's tone as he addresses the woman, as if he's already giving her more credibility simply by the way he's asking. The woman, her voice unwavering, begins to explain, her words tinged with alarm. "I saw him here with his child, and I just felt something wasn't right. I don't know. I just had this feeling." She hesitates, as though searching for words that will make her claim seem more valid, but the officer's expression doesn't change. He listens, nodding slowly, but there's a strange detachment in his eyes. It's as though he's heard similar complaints before, the same vague concerns, and he knows better than to jump to conclusions. But the father knows that what happens next is far from certain. The officer turns his attention back to the father. "What's your name, sir?" The words are routine, but there's an edge to them, as if this question is more about making sure his story aligns with the woman's than anything else. The father takes a deep breath, trying to gather himself. "I'm just here with my daughter. We've been playing, enjoying the afternoon," he says, trying to keep his tone measured. He doesn't want to escalate things, but he also refuses to shrink. He's not in the wrong, and he wants the officer to see that. The officer nods again, but this time, there's something in his eyes, a flicker of hesitation. "We just need to make sure everything's okay. Can you explain what happened here?" The father glances at the woman, her posture still stiff and self-assured, her eyes never leaving him. The officer's question hangs in the air like a weight. The father doesn't know whether he should explain the entire situation, how they've been playing together, laughing, enjoying the sunshine, or if he should just let the silence speak for itself. He wonders what the officer will believe, given the circumstances. Will they see him for who he is, or will the woman's assumption cloud their judgment? And then, before the father can speak again, the sound of a child's laughter breaks the tense silence. His daughter, unaware of the growing tension, runs toward the swings, her eyes shining with excitement. The sight of her joy, the innocence of her world, seems to shift something in the officer's gaze. For a moment, the tension lifts, and the father dares to hope that perhaps, just perhaps, this will all resolve without incident. But just as quickly as the hope appears, the woman's voice rings out again. "I'm just saying, I'm not sure if he's really the father. He's acting kind of strange around the child. I think something is off." There's no real evidence behind her words, no justification, but she says them with such certainty that the words begin to feel like truth, if only because they're repeated enough times. The officer looks at her again, and then back at the father. The woman's accusations hang in the air, and the father's stomach churns. He can feel his pulse quicken, the familiar knot of frustration and helplessness tightening in his chest. It's a feeling he knows all too well, the feeling of being misunderstood, of having to prove something that should never have been in question in the first place. "I'm just a dad, here with my daughter," he repeats, trying to sound calm, but the words are starting to feel hollow. He's done nothing wrong, yet here he is, standing in front of the police, being questioned, being judged. And for what? Because of someone's misplaced discomfort, their fear of the unknown? The officer glances between the two of them, his face unreadable. The silence stretches for what feels like an eternity. The father's eyes flick back to the woman, and he can see the barely concealed triumph in her gaze. She's won in her mind. Her accusation has set this all in motion, and now she's watching to see what happens next. The tension in the air is thick, and the park, once a place of laughter and fun, now feels like a battleground. The other parents, who were once enjoying their afternoon, now stand at a distance, unsure of whether to intervene or stay out of it. Some look at the father with sympathy, others with wariness, but none of them seem willing to step forward. And then, just as the father feels his resolve beginning to crack, one of the officers steps forward. He looks at the father, then back at the woman, and for a brief moment, the father thinks he might speak in his favor. But instead, the officer's words are directed at the woman. "We've been getting calls all day, ma'am," the officer says, his voice calm but firm. "We have to investigate every report, but I don't see any reason to escalate this further. Everything seems fine here. The child appears to be in no danger." He turns back to the father. "Enjoy the rest of your day, sir." The father stands still, unsure whether to believe the officer's words or to brace for more confrontation. His daughter, still smiling, looks back at him, unaware of the tension that has nearly ruined their afternoon. But as the officers turn to leave, the woman's expression falters. She stands frozen, her phone still clutched tightly in her hand. It's clear that this isn't the outcome she had hoped for, and the father can't help but wonder how much of this was about her own discomfort, her own prejudices. It's a reminder that, sometimes, even the smallest of moments can be loaded with meaning, with history, with the weight of things unsaid. The father watches as the officers walk away, the situation defused for now, but he knows it's not over. This moment will stay with him, with them. It's not just about one incident, one accusation. It's part of a larger story, one that will continue to unfold, not just in the park, but in every corner of society where judgment is cast without understanding. The officers drive away, their departure marked by the fading sound of their sirens, leaving behind an eerie quiet that seems to hang in the air. The father stands there for a moment, frozen, not knowing whether to feel relief or dread. His daughter, still blissfully unaware of the tension, tugs on his hand, urging him to follow her to the swings. But he doesn't move immediately. His mind is reeling, replaying the events, trying to make sense of what just happened. How did something so simple, so innocent, turn into this? As he watches her run toward the swings, the same sinking feeling settles in his stomach. It's not the first time something like this has happened. He's been in situations before where he felt like he was being watched, where he sensed people looking at him differently, sizing him up, judging him. But today, something about it feels different. It feels like a line was crossed, like a point of no return has been reached. He turns his gaze toward the woman who made the call. She's still standing there, her phone now tucked away, her eyes scanning the park like she's waiting for something else to happen. For a brief moment, their eyes meet. The father sees no remorse in her gaze, no hesitation, just an uncomfortable certainty, as if she believes, deep down, that she did the right thing. But what's more disturbing is how little she seems to care about the consequences of her actions. She doesn't see him as a father, as a man just enjoying a day with his child. In her mind, he's a threat, something to be feared, something to be removed. The father turns away, swallowing the bitter taste that's lodged in his throat. He's had enough of this. Enough of the judgment. Enough of the assumptions. Enough of the feeling that no matter how hard he tries, how many good intentions he has, it's never enough to prove his worth. He tries to push these thoughts out of his mind, but they linger, just beneath the surface, threatening to boil over. In the distance, a few other families begin to pack up and leave, no doubt influenced by the earlier disturbance. He sees a few parents glance in his direction as they walk by, their eyes either sympathetic or uncomfortable. It's hard to tell which. But what stands out to him is the subtle way they move away from him, their children pulling them in the opposite direction. He's a stranger in their eyes, someone who doesn't belong. His daughter's laughter pulls him back into the moment, and he forces himself to take a few steps toward her. He watches her climb up the swing set with the same carefree enthusiasm she's always had, blissfully unaware of what just transpired. It's a small comfort, knowing that she's still a child, still free from the weight of the world. But for him, things have changed. He feels it now, a shift that can't be undone. The world around him no longer feels the same. It's the quiet moments that hurt the most when he's left alone with his thoughts, reflecting on how much further he has to go just to be seen for who he is. Not a threat, not a problem, just a father trying to do right by his child. He takes a deep breath and tries to shake off the feeling. He knows he can't let it consume him. He has to keep moving, keep going for her. For his daughter. But even as he pushes the thoughts away, a small voice inside him asks, "What now?" The woman's call may have ended with the officers driving off, but its ripple effect hasn't. It lingers in the back of his mind as he watches his daughter swing higher and higher, her laughter still filling the air. The incident hasn't been resolved, not truly. It's simply been pushed aside for now. But he knows this won't be the last time something like this happens. And next time, it might not end as quietly. As the sun begins to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the park, he can't help but notice the subtle shifts in the atmosphere around him. It's as if the world is holding its breath. No one wants to confront what's just happened, but everyone can feel it. There's a quiet tension in the air, an unspoken discomfort that no one is brave enough to address. The father looks around the park, his eyes scanning the people nearby. He notices a couple of children who had been playing near the swings, now whispering to each other as they watch him. Their parents stand a little further off, talking in hushed voices. The father wonders if they're talking about him, if they've made their own judgments, or if they too are just uncomfortable with the situation but don't know how to deal with it. The discomfort is everywhere, even in the people who weren't directly involved. It's a reminder that moments like these don't just affect the people at the center of them, they affect everyone who witnesses them. One of the other parents, a woman he's never seen before, walks past him with her child, and for a brief moment, their eyes meet. She offers him a smile, small but genuine, and in that moment, he feels a flicker of connection. It's not much, but it's enough to remind him that not everyone is blinded by fear or judgment. Some people still see him for who he is, a father, a person. It's a small act of kindness, but it's one he holds onto as he turns his attention back to his daughter. But even as he appreciates the brief moment of human connection, another thought creeps into his mind. What if he's not just being judged by strangers in the park? What if this has deeper implications, ones that stretch beyond this moment? What if this woman's call, her suspicion, her actions, are part of a larger system of bias, one that goes beyond just this park, beyond just his family? It's a troubling thought, one that he can't shake. It's the kind of thing that keeps him up at night, wondering what kind of world his daughter will grow up in, and whether she will face the same unfair treatment that he does. He doesn't want to be consumed by anger or fear, but he also doesn't want to ignore the reality that something is terribly wrong. The uncertainty of it all, the not knowing what will happen next, is almost too much to bear. He stands still for a moment, watching his daughter's joy as she swings higher, her laughter echoing in his ears. There's something painfully beautiful in the innocence of it. And as much as he wants to protect her from the harshness of the world, he knows he can't shield her from everything. She'll grow up and face challenges of her own, and he'll have to teach her how to navigate a world that doesn't always see her for who she is. A world that judges her based on the color of her skin, based on assumptions and stereotypes. He's interrupted by the sudden ringing of his phone. He pulls it out of his pocket and sees that it's a message from his partner. He swipes to read it, his fingers hesitating for just a moment before he opens the text. "How was the park? You good?" It's a simple message, but it hits him harder than he expected. He's not sure how to respond. How do you explain what's happened, the undercurrent of fear and frustration that's now settled deep in his bones? How do you put into words that something as simple as spending time with your child has been twisted into something more complicated, something dangerous? His finger hovers over the keyboard, and for a moment, he doesn't know what to say. Instead, he types back one simple word, "fine." It's a lie, but it's the only word that seems to fit. At least for now. The evening begins to settle over the park, the orange hue of the setting sun casting long shadows across the playground. The father watches as his daughter's laughter echoes in the cool air, her face bright with joy. But beneath the surface, his mind races, unable to let go of the unease that has settled in his chest. Every small noise, every glance, every movement of the other families around him feels amplified, like a ticking clock counting down to something inevitable. He can still hear the woman's voice in his mind, her words ringing out in the air like a distant echo. "I don't know, something isn't right." That feeling she had, that vague, unsubstantiated suspicion, had nearly shattered the peace of his day. And while the officers had dismissed her call, the thought lingers: how many people out there share her thoughts? How many others would look at him and see only what they've been conditioned to see? As he watches his daughter play, the weight of the situation presses down harder on him. He can't shake the feeling that this isn't just about one isolated incident. It's a symptom of something much bigger, something far more dangerous. The judgment, the assumption, the way people decide who belongs and who doesn't, it's all tied together in a knot of fear, bias, and misunderstanding. His phone buzzes again, pulling him out of his thoughts. It's another message from his partner, checking in. "You sure everything's fine? You seem off. I'm coming to pick you up." The father stares at the screen, his finger hovering over the keys. What can he say? How does he explain everything that's swirling inside him? He wants to tell her what happened, but he knows it's not just about the phone call. It's about the years of small moments like this, the constant weight of feeling like an outsider in spaces that should feel safe. It's about the quiet indignity of being questioned, even in the simplest of settings, for no reason other than the color of his skin. As he types out a quick reply, "No need. I'll be fine," his daughter's voice rings out again, cutting through his thoughts. "Dad, watch me." She's standing at the top of the slide, her eyes wide with excitement. For a moment, he's transported back to the innocence of their shared moment, the joy of being together in a space that should have been free of fear. But the tranquility is short-lived. A sudden commotion breaks out in the park. At first, it's just a few voices raised in confusion, but then, there's the unmistakable sound of a loud argument. The father's head snaps around, his heart racing. He sees a group of parents standing near the park's entrance, gesturing wildly. Their voices rise and fall, a mix of anger and disbelief. It doesn't take long for him to realize that they're arguing about him. The scene plays out slowly, as though everything is happening in slow motion. The father can't quite make out the words, but he knows what's happening. Someone must have seen what happened earlier, and now, the conversation is escalating. He can feel the weight of every glance directed in his direction, every whisper behind his back. The knot in his stomach tightens. His daughter, still perched atop the slide, glances over at the commotion. For a brief moment, their eyes meet. Her innocent curiosity is interrupted by the rising tension in the air, and it hits him all at once. She's beginning to feel it too. She's beginning to sense the change in the energy around them. His heart clenches. He moves quickly toward her, his instincts kicking in. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's go," he says, his voice low and steady, trying not to let the panic slip through. But as he reaches the bottom of the slide, he notices the same woman from before. She's standing a little further off, talking animatedly to a couple of other parents, pointing toward him. There's no mistaking the expression on her face. She's still on the phone, still stirring the pot, still trying to make something out of nothing. The father feels his hands tighten into fists at his sides. His daughter, still unaware of what's happening, climbs down from the slide and runs toward him, a huge smile on her face. He wants to smile back, to be the father she deserves, the one who keeps things light, who makes everything okay. But today, it's different. Today, he feels like the world is closing in around them, and he doesn't know how to protect her from it. He takes her hand, his fingers pressing tightly against hers, but his eyes are scanning the park, looking for any sign of trouble. The argument near the entrance is still going strong, and now, a couple of other parents are starting to approach them, some with concerned expressions, others more hesitant. The father can feel the weight of their judgment, even before a single word is spoken. "Hey, are you okay?" one of the parents asks, her voice hesitant, as though unsure if she should even approach him. The father forces a smile, but it doesn't reach his eyes. "We're fine. Just a misunderstanding." He tries to keep his tone light, but it's a struggle. The parent nods slowly, her gaze flicking over to the woman still pointing in his direction. "There's been a lot of talk around here. I don't know what happened, but it seems like people are." She trails off, her voice faltering. She doesn't want to say it. Doesn't want to acknowledge what's really going on. But the father knows. He can feel it in the air, in the way people are looking at him, in the way the tension is rising again, more intense than before. He doesn't want to escalate things further, doesn't want to make a scene, but the frustration is building up inside him. How can they not see it? How can they not see him as just a father, here with his child, trying to enjoy a simple moment together? Before he can respond, he hears the unmistakable sound of sirens in the distance again. They're getting closer, and his heart skips a beat. This time, it feels different. It feels more official, like they're coming back to finish what was started. His breath catches in his throat as the realization sets in. This isn't just a random call. This is something that's going to change everything. He grips his daughter's hand tighter, his mind racing. He doesn't know what's going to happen next, doesn't know how far this will go. The officers are coming back, and he doesn't know what they'll do. He doesn't know if they'll even listen to him this time, or if they'll treat him like a criminal in front of his child, just because of an unfounded accusation. The sirens are louder now, unmistakable, and the father feels a cold rush of dread wash over him. He wants to run, wants to take his daughter and disappear, but he knows he can't. He has to face this. He has to stand his ground. As the squad cars pull into the park once more, his mind races, and for a moment, time seems to slow down. Everything is building to this moment, to the final confrontation. And as the officers step out of the cars, the father's heart pounds in his chest. He can't help but wonder, will this be the moment everything changes, or will it all crumble around them? The officers step out of their cars, their presence commanding, and the father feels the weight of it all settle heavily on his shoulders. His heart beats faster as they walk toward him, their faces unreadable. He can hear his daughter's voice in the distance, still calling out to him, but it sounds muffled, distant. The world has narrowed to just him, the officers, and the gathering crowd of onlookers. For a moment, he wonders if they even see him, or if they just see the story they've already told themselves. He stands frozen, his mind racing with 1,000 questions. What will happen now? Will they treat him like a criminal? Will they believe the lies? His grip tightens on his daughter's hand as the officers draw closer, their eyes scanning the scene, sizing him up. He's not sure what's worse, being judged by strangers or the thought of his daughter seeing this, seeing her father being treated like something he's not. One of the officers steps forward, his voice stern but professional. "Sir, we need to ask you some questions." The father swallows hard, his throat dry. He wants to speak, to explain, to make them see that this is all a misunderstanding, but the words are stuck. Instead, he nods slowly, trying to keep his composure. Before he can say anything, the woman who made the call suddenly appears beside the officers, her face twisted with a strange mix of smug satisfaction and something darker, something almost vindictive. She points at him with a sharp finger, her eyes never leaving his. "That's him. He's the one," she says, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. His heart sinks as he feels the stares of the crowd, the silent judgment radiating from every corner of the park. It's as though her words have sealed his fate. He can almost hear the whispers behind him. Is he guilty? Is he a danger? He doesn't know if he can take it much longer. The tension in the air is thick, almost suffocating. The officers, still calm and composed, exchange a brief glance. One of them turns back to him, his tone cool but commanding. "We've received a report about suspicious behavior. Can you explain why you're here with your daughter alone?" The question stings. The accusation is veiled, but it's there, lingering in the air like a heavy fog. The father's grip on his daughter's hand tightens as he tries to remain steady, to not let the anger, the frustration, boil over. This isn't just about a misunderstanding, it's about the assumption that he's a threat simply because of who he is. "I'm just here with my daughter," he says, his voice low but firm. "We're not doing anything wrong." The officer nods, but there's a hesitation in his eyes, a subtle doubt that the father can't quite shake. "We need to verify your identity and check on your background, just to make sure everything's in order." The words hang in the air, cold and clinical. He knows what they're implying. They're not just questioning his presence, they're questioning his worth. His very right to be here, in this public space, with his child. For a moment, everything goes quiet. The world seems to freeze as the weight of the situation presses down on him. He can feel his daughter's hand in his, the warmth of her tiny fingers trembling slightly. She's scared. He can feel it in the way she's holding on to him now, the unspoken fear that's taken root in her heart. But then, just as quickly as the silence falls, something unexpected happens. The woman who made the call, standing just behind the officers, suddenly shifts her position. Her face changes, the smugness replaced by something else, something far more unsettling. She takes a step toward him, her hand trembling slightly. She pauses, as if unsure how to continue. "I made a mistake," she says, her voice cracking with an unexpected vulnerability. The words hang in the air, and for a moment, the father doesn't know how to react. Is this a trick? Is she backing off now because she realizes the gravity of what she's done, or is there something more to it? The officers exchange a look, their expressions unreadable, and the woman seems to lose some of her resolve. She looks at him again, her eyes darting to the ground, before looking back at the officers. I thought I saw something. I thought he was acting suspiciously, but now, I'm not so sure. Her voice is barely above a whisper, and for the first time, he senses something more than just guilt in her demeanor. There's fear now, too. The father stands still, not sure if he should feel relieved or more confused than ever. It feels like everything he's been fighting for, the trust, the belief in his own innocence, is being stripped away, piece by piece. The doubt that the woman had instilled in everyone is now being replaced by doubt in herself. But it doesn't change the fact that she called the police. It doesn't change the fact that the entire park now knows his name, knows his face, and probably has already made up their minds. The officer who had been questioning him now looks directly at the woman, his tone shifting from authoritative to cautious. Are you saying there's no need for us to proceed further? She hesitates, clearly battling with herself. The crowd of onlookers watches closely, some exchanging glances, others still too wary to speak. The weight of the moment presses down on everyone, and the tension feels like it could snap at any moment. I don't know, she stammers, her voice breaking. Maybe I overreacted. I thought something wasn't right, but now I see. She trails off, the words uncertain. The certainty that had filled her before is gone, replaced by something more fragile. The officer looks back at the father, his face still neutral but his eyes searching, trying to gauge the situation. The crowd around them is eerily quiet now, and the father can feel the full weight of their eyes, each one filled with suspicion, uncertainty, and judgment. His daughter, sensing the shift, pulls on his hand again, looking up at him with wide eyes. Daddy? Can we go home now? The father takes a deep breath, trying to steady himself. For a moment, he's not sure how to answer her. This moment, this fear, it isn't just his to carry anymore. It's hers too. It's the moment she begins to understand the world isn't as kind and safe as it once seemed. The woman, still standing behind the officers, looks at the father one last time, her face filled with something between guilt and shame. She opens her mouth as if to say something more, but then shuts it, unable to finish the thought. The officers stand silent, unsure how to proceed. The crowd waits. The father's heart pounds, his mind racing as he tries to make sense of it all. It feels like the world is hanging on the edge of a decision, waiting for someone to tip the scales one way or the other. And for the father, it's as if everything is now out of his hands. What will happen next? What comes of this moment of doubt, this fragile shift? The tension in the air is palpable, and no one is sure whether it will break or hold. The tension in the park lingers in the air, thick and suffocating, as the officers stand motionless, eyeing both the father and the woman who made the call. The crowd, once whispering in hushed tones, has now fallen completely silent. All eyes are on them, waiting, expecting something to happen, something to break the uneasy stillness. The woman, still standing behind the officers, has yet to speak again, but her nervous movements betray her uncertainty. The father can feel the weight of the moment bearing down on him, the pressure mounting, but something inside him refuses to break. He can't let this define him. He can't let them think he's the person she tried to paint him as. The officer who had been questioning him looks from the father to the woman and then back again, as if trying to decide what to do. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, he speaks. We're going to call this off for now, he says, his voice calm but firm. It seems like there was a misunderstanding, and we don't need to proceed with any further action. The words hang in the air, but they don't feel like a victory. The father knows that the damage has already been done. The eyes of the crowd are still on him, the whispers have not stopped, and the doubt remains. His heart is heavy, not just from the fear and anger that have gripped him all afternoon, but from the realization that this moment will stay with him. It will linger in his daughter's memory, and in his own, forever. He starts to pull away, wanting nothing more than to get out of this park, to escape the judgment and the silent accusations. He turns to his daughter, who is still holding his hand tightly, her face uncertain and confused. He bends down, offering her a soft smile. "Let's go home, sweetheart," he says gently. But before they can leave, the woman, still standing behind the officers, speaks up once more. Her voice is quiet this time, almost apologetic. I don't know what came over me. I thought I saw something, but I didn't. I didn't mean to cause all this trouble." The father stops in his tracks, his heart pounding as he processes her words. He's not sure if she's genuinely remorseful or just embarrassed, but her voice cracks with something he can't quite place. Her gaze flicks to the ground, avoiding his eyes, and then to the officers. It's as if she's waiting for someone to validate her actions, to make her feel less guilty. But the father doesn't know how to respond. He wants to tell her it's okay, that he understands, but the truth is it's not okay. He can't erase the damage that's already been done, the doubt that's been planted in the minds of everyone around them. The system may have stopped the situation from escalating further, but the seeds of suspicion have already been sown. As the officers begin to walk away, their conversation turning to the next call they'll have to respond to, the father takes one last look around the park. The crowd, which had once been frozen in place, begins to disperse, their glances quickly shifting away from him, as if the incident had never happened. The father stands there for a moment longer, his mind spinning, trying to make sense of it all. But then, just as he begins to walk away, his daughter tugs at his hand. "Dad," she says softly, her voice filled with a quiet confusion he can't ignore. "Why did that lady call the police on you?" The question hangs in the air, too innocent, too raw, and for a moment, the father's heart breaks. He looks down at his daughter, her small face full of curiosity, but also fear. He hadn't wanted this for her, not this lesson in the reality of the world, not so soon. He wants to protect her, shield her from the hurt and disappointment, but he knows that's impossible. There's no shelter from this, not completely. Not in a world where a simple trip to the playground can turn into something much darker. He kneels down, his knees pressing into the soft grass as he looks into her eyes. "Sweetheart," he says, his voice steady but filled with emotion, some people see things differently. They don't always understand what's in our hearts." His daughter nods slowly, but he can see the confusion still clouding her eyes. She doesn't fully understand yet, not in the way he does, but he knows she will. She'll grow up in a world that will teach her these things, sometimes in painful, confusing ways. Before he can say more, the unexpected happens. The woman, who had been retreating into the background, takes a step forward again, her face uncertain but determined. She hesitates for a moment, glancing at the father and then at his daughter, and then surprisingly she approaches him. She starts, her voice wavering. "I know I can't undo what happened, but I want to say I'm sorry. I shouldn't have made that call. I was wrong." The father stands frozen, unsure of how to respond. Part of him wants to dismiss her, to turn away and keep walking, to leave the whole mess behind. But another part of him, one he can't ignore, wants to hear her out. He wants to believe that people can change, that they can grow and learn from their mistakes. The woman looks him in the eyes, her face full of genuine remorse. "I'm sorry for what I did. It wasn't right. I was scared, and I let that fear control me. But I see now how much damage I could have caused. I don't want to be the person who causes harm without even realizing it." For a brief moment, the father wonders if this is just another empty apology, another way to absolve herself of the guilt she's feeling. But as he really looks at her, he sees something different. There's no defensiveness in her eyes, no anger, no justification. Just a deep, quiet regret. His heart clenches in his chest. Maybe this is what real change looks like. Maybe this moment, this exchange, is the turning point. But it's still not enough. Not yet. He takes a deep breath, his voice calm but firm. It's a start, he says. But you have to understand, this isn't just about one mistake. This is about what happens when fear and judgment take over. This is about making sure it doesn't happen again, not just for me, but for anyone. The woman nods, her eyes filling with tears. I promise I'll do better. I won't forget what happened today. With that, she steps back, giving him space, and the father turns back to his daughter, who's still standing by his side. The air between them feels a little less heavy now, a little less tense. Maybe it's the apology, maybe it's the acknowledgement that things can change, or maybe it's just the fact that they're together, and that's enough for now. But as they walk away, hand in hand, the father can't shake the feeling that something else is at play here, something deeper. Because as they near the park exit, he glances back, and he sees the woman watching them, her expression unreadable. There's a lingering sense that the story isn't over yet, that the repercussions of this day will echo far beyond the playground. And in that moment, he knows the battle isn't just for him, it's for everyone who's ever had their humanity questioned, their worth doubted. The real story is just beginning. As the father and daughter walk away from the park, the weight of the day begins to settle on him, though he tries not to let it show. His daughter, walking beside him, still clutches his hand, her small fingers gripping his tightly, as if she's holding on to the only thing that feels safe in a world that's just felt too overwhelming. His mind churns with 1,000 thoughts of what just happened, of the woman who called the police, of how close everything came to spiraling out of control. But mostly it's the thoughts of his daughter, and how he'll explain all of this to her when she's older. Daddy, she says after a moment, her voice soft and unsure, are we safe now? The question hits him harder than he expects. It's the innocence in her voice, the absolute lack of understanding of the dangers that exist just beyond the playground. The realization that, in some ways, she's already beginning to learn the painful truths of the world, even though he wants to protect her from them for as long as he can. We're safe, he says, forcing a smile, even though the words feel hollow. We're always going to be safe, as long as we're together. She nods, but there's a sadness in her eyes now, a subtle shift that tells him she understands more than she lets on. His heart aches for her, knowing this moment the fear, the uncertainty will shape her in ways he can't yet predict. And while he hopes she'll grow up strong, aware, and resilient, he can't help but wish that innocence could remain just a little longer. The walk home feels longer than usual. They pass through quiet streets, the cool evening air offering a temporary respite from the tension of the afternoon. He looks at his daughter every few seconds, making sure she's still there, still holding his hand, still safe. It's a quiet walk, filled with thoughts that he can't fully express, and for a moment, the silence between them feels heavy in ways he wishes it didn't. When they finally reach their apartment, the father stands outside the door for a moment, taking a deep breath, as though bracing himself for what's next. He can hear his daughter humming a little tune to herself, her nervous energy now spent, and for a brief second, he's reminded of who they really are, just a father and daughter, trying to make sense of a world that doesn't always make sense. They step inside, and the father gently shuts the door behind them, locking it with a soft click. His daughter runs to the living room and begins to play with her toys, her usual carefree energy returning, though there's a slight wariness in her movements. He watches her for a moment before sitting down on the couch, his body tired but his mind still racing. He thinks about the woman at the park, and what she said about her mistake. He thinks about the officers, how they handled the situation, and whether or not they truly understood what happened, or if they'd just written it off as another misunderstanding. But most of all, he thinks about his daughter, and the conversation they'll need to have, the one that will begin with simple questions but will inevitably evolve into a deeper understanding of the world. He doesn't want to have that conversation. He wants to shield her from the harsh realities that come with growing up, but he knows it's inevitable. The world will teach her, whether he's ready or not. As the evening unfolds, he keeps his eyes on his daughter, still distracted by her toys but every so often looking up to check on him, as if seeking reassurance. Her gaze is soft, innocent, but there's a knowingness in it now, a quiet understanding of something that once felt too far away for her to comprehend. It's then that his phone buzzes on the coffee table, breaking the silence. He picks it up and sees a message from a friend, a text that seems to carry a weight he hadn't expected. The message reads, "I heard what happened at the park. Are you okay?" For a moment, he just stares at the screen, the words jumping out at him, a stark reminder that the world outside hasn't forgotten what happened. His friend's concern is genuine, but it also serves as a reminder of how quickly rumors spread, how quickly something can be taken out of context and twisted into something more. He doesn't know if he's ready to talk about it yet, doesn't know if he's ready to relive that moment, but he knows he will have to. The conversation will come. People will ask questions, offer advice, or even judge him for the way things unfolded. He types a simple reply, "I'm fine. Just trying to process it all." He puts the phone down and takes another look at his daughter, who's now humming loudly as she plays, lost in her own little world. There's a quiet strength in her, a resilience that he's only beginning to see. She's stronger than he thought, more aware than he realized. Maybe it's because of days like today, days that force you to grow up faster than you want to. But as he watches her, he realizes something important. Despite the pain, despite the fear, they will be okay. They'll face the challenges of the world together. The world may try to break them, to make them doubt themselves, but as long as they have each other, they will rise above it. The night stretches on in peaceful quiet, with only the soft sound of his daughter's laughter breaking the silence. The weight of the afternoon lingers in his chest, but he lets it go for now. The world will still be there tomorrow, with its challenges and its uncertainties, but tonight, in this moment, it's just him and his daughter. And that's enough. But as the evening turns to night, and the last remnants of daylight fade, he's reminded that this story isn't truly over. The woman at the park, the officers, the people who had watched and judged, it's all part of something bigger. There's a system, a world of assumptions and biases, that can't be ignored. What happened to him, what happened to his daughter, isn't just a singular event. It's a reflection of a broader issue, one that goes beyond just one playground incident. It's a story that so many others have lived through, in different ways and at different times. Tomorrow, the world will continue turning, but it will be different for him. He's been changed by today, by the experience of being seen not for who he truly is, but for the fear others project onto him. But even with that change, there's hope. There's always hope. He may not have all the answers, but he knows that he can make a difference, small, incremental, but real. And so can his daughter. It starts with moments like today, with understanding, with growth, and with the quiet resolve to do better, to be better. And as they sit in the quiet of their home, he feels a glimmer of something that's been missing from the day, a sense of peace, a quiet belief that, despite everything, they will be okay. They will keep moving forward, and whatever challenges come next, they will face them together. It's not the end of the story, but it's a new chapter. And that's enough for now.